Hi, my name's Kelly and welcome to my channel. Today, I'm going to be talking about 10 classic books that I definitely recommend people give a shot. Now, does that mean that these are my top 10? No, and here's why I'm going to say that. One, I'm limiting myself in this video to only one book or series per author. Secondly, I've never really taken the time to sit down and be like, oh, these are my legitimate top 10 classics. Maybe someday I will, but in the meantime, I'm just going to make a video about 10 books that I think are worth a shot. They're worth the read. I enjoyed reading them, or maybe after I was done with them, I at least had a lot to think about or talk about with people. Also, I plan to do more of these in the future, and so I'm hoping to give a bit of a variety with each video that I make of talking about classics. So that being said, the first one I want to talk about is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. I talked about this in a tag that I did where it was like, hey, an unlikable main character. Boy, if there ever was one. So Dorian is a man that is very good looking. There is a painting or a picture that is made of him. The painting is done by somebody who really cares about him, and in their painting is able to portray his innocence, his purity, and at that time his kindness. Someone else sees the painting and makes a comment about how, you know, your beauty is only going to be so long and lasting and getting what you want, and then you're going to be old and ugly and no one will love you, no one will care about you, you know, getting in his ear. And then he becomes super obsessed about his looks. He becomes super obsessed about needing to stay good looking. It's a great conversation starter for how beauty can be only skin deep. If you haven't read this, I would give it a shot. I'm not saying that it is a book that you walk away from feeling light and fluffy and happy. It's a darker book, but the conversation that comes from it is really great. The next classic that I'll talk about is The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. I read this book for the first time when I was in 6th grade. We read it as a class, and it stayed one of my favorite books for years. I called it the favorite book of mine for years. I've come across some other books in the meantime that I think I might place higher than it, but it does not change how amazing this book is. It is so good. There's this hobbit, Bilbo Baggins. He goes on an adventure across Middle Earth, and Tolkien's writing style is beautiful. The characters that you get to meet are just awesome. Such a variety, and they all have a depth to them. They're not just surface level, like this is the kind of person that they are. They're well-rounded, and it's fun. Some of the things that they see or do, it's a epic adventure, and I definitely recommend this book. On a different note, one that may not be as fun and adventure-filled, but still thought-provoking, is Animal Farm by George Orwell. I read this for the first time in high school. This book is a great example of how things can go from being paradise-like to dystopian and real quick. So there is this farm, and the animals decide to take over, and while everything seems to be going really well and it's like their own, like I said, a little paradise for themselves, there are those who want to be in control, and they want to keep others from having any control. I'm glad that I read it in high school because it helped me to understand some of the dangers of not being informed and just kind of trusting whatever people were telling me. So I recommend this book as well. Another book that I would recommend that has a bit more of a jolly feel to it. Anne of Green Gables. This book, my goodness. So it's by Ellen Montgomery. She does such an amazing job of writing a character that, once again, very well rounded. She has her flaws, but she's also awesome. She is such a fun character. I think that I love her so much because I empathize with her. I have a tendency to be a little out in space, if you know what I mean, like she does sometimes. She looks at the world with such a romantic view, and she sees the beauty in all of the little things, and I love that about her. She grows so much. She finds a family that is loving and accepting of her, but still pushes her to be a better version of herself. It's just, this is such a good book. I definitely recommend Anne of Green Gables, even as an adult. The next one is The Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis. You want to know what's weird is I know that this is fiction, right? But because of the theological truths in it, my brain thinks of it as nonfiction. I know it's fiction, but my brain, there's so much depth in here as to the Christian religion and who we are as followers of Christ, and how the enemy tries to keep us from growing in our faith or even continuing in our faith. And so Screwtape Letters is a book that letters. There's a demon that his name is Screwtape, and he is writing letters to his nephew who has been assigned to a Christian, and he's trying to give him advice on how to distract or turn his Christian assignment away from God. This book is so good. I love this book. It makes you think of things that maybe otherwise you wouldn't have thought of, and he brings up situations that he's like, oh, if you could just make them focus more on this, then they won't focus on this other thing you have to distract or what have you. And then you apply that to your own life and you think, oh, I realize that I'm being distracted by this instead of focusing on this. And then it helps you to turn your attention back to God or back to whatever he's wanting you to stay focused on. Anyway, great book. I definitely recommend it. I'm gonna say I definitely recommend after all of these, which might get monotonous, but sorry. So the next book is To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. This is another book I read in high school, and I read it in high school. Let's be real, I did spark notes, but I felt like I had got the main point. And then as an adult, I thought, do you know what? I want to revisit this. And I'm so glad I did. I'm so glad that I actually read the book all the way through. If you hear anybody in the background, I apologize. People are playing video games. So Scout is a young girl that lives with her dad Atticus and her brother Jem. They have a neighbor named Boo Radley, and this book kind of goes over some of the difficult things that people were thinking or believing of other people that were different at the time, some of the prejudices that were going on in the world. Some of it is very hard. Some of it is very heart-wrenching. But it is such a good book, and honestly, I think that if a book is going to push the way that you think it's going to push the way that you look at other people, I think that it's worth the read. And this is definitely one of those books. I really recommend this book. I've read it a few times. I'm so excited for my daughter to read it this coming up year. It's really great. The next book, well, series I want to recommend is the Tripod series by John Christopher. My husband read this when he was a kid, and he kept talking about how he really enjoyed it, and I had never heard of it. So when I was getting ready to homeschool my son, one of the recommended books for free read with this curriculum that we use was the Tripod series, and I was like, well, that's perfect. It'll give me a chance to get it for my son to read, but then I'll get to read it also. I ended up reading it before my son got to it. This is another dystopian, so there are these tripods, as you can see, and they take people after these ceremonies, and then the people come back different, and with metal plates on their head, and they're just not the same that they once were. And there are people that are unsure if they want to go through this ceremony in which this happens. But all of the adults are like, oh, this is the best thing. But then there are some people that they don't take to it well, and then they kind of wander around life, and so there's this fear that, you know, what if you turn out like one of these people that kind of turn crazy? This series explores how all of this came to be in the first place, where these things came from, what's operating them, the adventures that people go through to decide where they're going, if they want to continue down the path that these things have for them, how they will fight it if they decide to fight it. It's just definitely worth checking out if you haven't read it yet. It's like a dystopian set, but for children, that is not as overwhelming or scary as some of the other dystopian novels out there that can be also maybe a little crude sometimes. So I would definitely check this out. The 8th book I'd like to recommend to you guys is The Moonstone by Wilkie Collins. Listen, can you hear my husband laughing? Anyway, so this book is probably one of the best mystery books I've ever read. It kept me guessing all the way up until the end. So there is this moonstone that is taken during the wars in India that the English were involved in. This moonstone has a bit of a past that tends to indicate that it is cursed. The gem ends up coming into the hands of a young woman, but by the next morning, it's gone. So there's this whole search. What happened to the moonstone? What's going on? And it goes through, and it's so cool because it will do something from one person's perspective, and then it's like this person is interviewing other people to see, okay, so what was your experience during that night? Okay, what was your experience? And so he goes through and kind of investigative approach to figuring out what happened to the moonstone. It's so good. Like, I absolutely love this book. It's 462 pages. This printing is. I zoomed through it. I absolutely zoomed through this because I was intrigued. Check it out. If you haven't read this yet, check it out. Another book I would like to recommend is The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte. So I know that the other Bronte sisters are a bit more popular, but Anne is my favorite. The first book I read of hers was Agnes Grey, which I enjoyed, and then I read Tenant of Wildfell Hall, and I think that I enjoyed this more. I love her writing style. It's a bit more in her storytelling like that of Jane Austen. It's like she's kind of like easier to understand than Jane Austen, right? But more along the storytelling of Jane Austen as opposed to her sisters. It's not as dark. It is, I feel like her stories are things that we can relate to a little easier. She has a tendency to talk about things that are a little hard. Like if you're in a situation that it is hard to do what you know is right. And do you still do it? Do you still do the thing that you know is right, even though it's hard and everybody around you makes it difficult to do that thing that is right? Okay, so I'm actually going to read the back of this one a little bit because I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I think it sums up pretty good the beginning of it and why it's so intriguing to continue. Gilbert Markham is deeply intrigued by Helen Graham, a beautiful and secretive woman who has moved into nearby Wildfell Hall with her young son. He is quick to offer Helen his friendship, but when her reclusive behavior becomes the subject of local gossip and speculation, Gilbert begins to wonder whether his trust in her has been misplaced. I'm gonna stop right there. This is totally worth the read, especially if you like the Brontes, but you feel like they're a little dark, but you definitely like Jane Austen, but you want something maybe just a smidgen grittier. Check it out. I think that Anne Bronte is definitely underrated. And my pile's shaking. Okay. And then the last book I want to recommend is Pride and Prejudice. My cover is very plain, but you can see it says Pride and Prejudice right there, see? Of course, I'm not going to make a video about 10 recommended classics without mentioning Jane Austen. Okay, so Pride and Prejudice was the first Jane Austen book that I read. It was actually, I saw the movie first. I had never really known about Jane Austen, and my sister had me watch the movie with her, the one with Keira Knightley, and I was like, oh, this is actually really good. I tried reading the book after watching the movie, and it was very hard for me to understand. Jane Austen's writing style is not in the same caliber as what we are used to today with more contemporary text. So I waited a few years, watched the BBC version a couple of times, then went back to this, kind of pushed through it. And the more I pushed through it, the more I understood it. And by the end, I was reading it easily and laughing at all the funny parts, and it is so good. So it's definitely worth the read. If it's hard for you to understand, maybe listen to an audiobook while reading along with it. That helped my daughter with her first Jane Austen novel. But it's a great story about family, about a little bit of scandal, about, of course, prejudice. How does that keep you from seeing people for who they are? Pride. How does that keep you from being the best version of yourself? And it's quintessential enemies to lovers. If you're into it, check it out. But yeah, this is probably definitely one of my favorite books. I love Jane Austen. I love all of her, most of her novels. I need to give one of them another shot or two to maybe it will grow on me. But Pride and Prejudice, it only took one time and I love it. I for sure recommend this one. Anyhow, that's all. That's all I'm recommending for today. Maybe I'll make another one sometime soon. If you've read any of these books, I'd love to hear your thoughts on them. If you have a book that you would like to see me talk about next time, let me know. Have a great day, guys. God bless. Bye.